Hi, I'm Rob and welcome to East Coast Sailing. Come and join an incredibly average sailor, achieving incredibly unaverage results. This channel focuses on uncut sailing adventures from a solo sailor's perspective. I work full-time, so my sailing adventures are restricted to the weekends, with the occasional longer trip being thrown in throughout the year. I don't have the luxury of being able to pick and choose the days I get to go sailing. When I book my holiday off a year in advance, whatever the cards that are dealt, I have to play the hand. In last week's episode, we covered the gentle ride over the Thames Estuary from my home port of Woolverstone. We crossed the busy shipping lanes with an unresponsive captain at the wheel of Morton Maersk. I also covered the legal procedures when crossing the Thames Estuary to make sure you don't land yourself an unlimited fine. We headed past the historic Red Sands forts, the nautical bastions that protected the Thames Estuary and London from World War II plane attacks. We headed past the Richard Montgomery full of explosives before heading up the River Medway before reaching Chatham. After a quick overnight stop in Chatham, we headed over to the historic maritime dockyards to explore all the World War II relics. I left the boat in Chatham and headed back with the family before we would arrive back the following week to go and explore Faversham. In today's episode, we'll be covering the short journey from Chatham to Faversham. We'll be travelling 22 nautical miles along the River Medway before heading round the back of the Isle of Sheppey. We'll head up the River Swale and pass under the Queensferry lifting bridge. We'll continue the journey along the Faversham Creek along the muddy inlets where I get stuck not once, not twice, but 3 times before finally landing in Faversham.
Good morning people, it's day 2 of the sailing adventure and I'm down at Chatham Marina and we're going to head towards Faversham. So we've got a little bit of rain today and just my luck, it hasn't rained for about a month, and today we've got rain all weekend and there's quite high winds. So we've got the engine on, all the lines are prepared and we're just going to head out of the lock gate, so let's see how this goes.
We're going to Faversham now.
Channel 80. Chatham Marina, sailing vessel Ivania inside the basin, permission to leave, over.
Ivania, this is Chatham. Yeah, I'll get the bridge up for you now, just enter on the green light, over.
Many thanks, Ivania, standing by, over.
I untied the last line that held Ivania to the dock, and we slid away from the berth that had been our home for the week. Despite the rain and the cold, nothing was going to get in the way of me enjoying my day off from work. A wise person once said, "A bad day on the sea is 100 times better than a good day at work."
That's the bridge for Daddy.
It was an early 5 AM start and I was gliding towards the bridge and waved goodbye to Fran and Hugo. Whilst they were going to travel to Faversham in the warmth of a car with probably a nice Starbucks, I was going to have to make the 22 nautical mile journey solo in the rain. Bringing our home from home round. Sometimes a wife will never understand the sacrifices a husband has to make. As the hydraulic locking doors behind me closed, the front doors began to open, letting all the water out and lowering the basin height to that of the estuary outside. The lock works a bit like a toilet. There's only so many flushes you can have before there's no water left in the cistern. That's why there's a restriction on how many lock movements can be done when the internal basin height is higher than that of the estuary outside. You can see how strong the water flow is when the doors finally open, releasing all the excess water. And once the level inside the basin is equal to that of the estuary outside, we can untie Ivania safely without getting pulled into one of the pontoon walls.
It's the UK bank holiday at the end of May and the weather is terrible. We have double raindrops on the weather forecasted for all 3 days, so it's not particularly nice. We're going to make the most of it though. We just left Chatham Marina and we're heading towards Faversham. So it's a small little muddy creek. I've only been there by car because the last time I tried to do that journey the weather was atrocious, so we just ended up getting a hotel. So this time we're doing it by boat, which is going to be great. Lots of little antique shops, lots of lovely restaurants to go and eat, and the best thing, they have my favourite brewery, which is Shepherd's Neame, which brews Bishop's Finger. So I'll be sinking a few frothy ones later on.
With the autopilot engaged, I began pulling in all the fenders and the ropes to make our way round to Faversham. People often scoff at the size and quantity of fenders I have, but I've never had a bad landing and wished I had smaller fenders. With all items stowed, it was time to enjoy the best of the British weather.
Right, you'll notice I haven't got the sails up. I'm cheating today. I'm being lazy. I'm being a lazy bugger because every time you go around one of these bends, the wind direction will change proportionately to the boat, and you have some of these high embankments and the wind just dies off and then it'll kick-start again, and I just want to enjoy it. It's only 22 nautical miles and we're going through some very thin channels, particularly around the back of the Isle of Sheppey. It's very muddy around there, and what we don't want to do is try and sail through a small little inlet that's only about 5-6 metres wide on the deepest part of the channel, because the last thing we want to do is get stuck.
Oh boy, and did we get stuck, not once, not twice, but 3 times.
On the spring tides, because we probably won't get the boat off for another few weeks. Also going to be going under the Kingsway Bridge, which is an incredible feat of engineering. That will lift up when you radio through on channel 10, and that whole platform lifts up and trains actually go over it, so it's a huge bit of civil engineering work. It's actually worth noting that we're leaving at the lowest point of the tide, and you get to see how different the tidal heights are from that muddy bank over there. It must be a good 4 or 5 metres difference today, and I think we're on spring tide, so it should be a very quick tide pushing us through the Swale around the back of the Isle of Sheppey, so it'll be quite a quick passage time today.
I headed past Gillingham Marina, and I've never stayed there before, but a big shout out to all the boat owners. Passed back round Hoo Island where my sailing journey started, and this fort was actually built in 1871. We were now motoring against a bit of tide as we passed through Gillingham Creek and taking care of that Hollywood smile for the day we entered the red carpet, and past the last isolated danger buoy.
We've been punching against a little bit of tide, just leaving the River Medway, and soon it's going to be working with us as we turn around the corner and head up the Swale. Just had a nice hot chocolate to warm up the hands because it's absolutely freezing today.
With a strong head-on wind, we had the tide behind us and we were going along at 6.1 knots over ground. The rain was relentless and it showed no signs of giving up. I was soaked through, but I was thoroughly enjoying myself. But trying to perform basic operations on a boat like using a touchscreen phone and chart plotter are just impossible. Beneath the heavy cloud cover, I could see the sun was trying to make an appearance for the day.
So I've got channel 10 on, ready to contact Ferry Bridge. I'm going to let them know my ETA. I'm probably going to be there in about 5 minutes, and they're going to be able to stop the traffic, raise the bridge, and hopefully I can go under with no issues. Ferry Bridge, sailing vessel Ivania approaching from the west. Can you raise the bridge, over?
Yeah, that'll be 22 the hour.
Many thanks, Ivania, standing by, over.
For some reason that really threw me. I've never heard anyone describing time as 20 to the hour. Next time if I'm meeting my wife in 2 hours time, I'm going to say I'm going to meet you 120 to the hour. We were halfway between tides and I had to circle a couple of times under the A249. Whenever you pass under bridges, it always looks like your mast is going to touch the underside, but on this occasion there was stacks of room. With the warning sirens blaring and the cars stopped for the lifting bridge, the sequence began to commence and the red lights soon turned to green. I was astounded by how quickly the lifting bridge raised up, and soon we had 3 green lights, which meant we could proceed. In my day-to-day job, I work in construction, so I can appreciate how complex these civil engineering feats are. And you can see from this smile how much I appreciate it. And as Anchorman would say, I love bridge. We were heading through a section of estuary called Longreach near Queensferry. It was a highly industrialised area where they had a timber yard nearby. With the size of some of the vessels, I had no doubt I had 19 metres under the keel, but the reading was actually given in feet. Somehow it had changed over during the night, which was the start of all of my problems. Lady Clara was being unladen of all of her sand. The crane drivers tooted their horn and gave me a wave as I headed round towards the Faversham Creek.
So we just sailed around the back of the Isle of Sheppey, and when the tide was pushing us around the back of the island, we've kind of met the midpoint once we went past the Queensferry Bridge, and now we're punching against a bit more tide before we turn into Faversham, where we'll have the tide pushing us into the estuary quite nicely. Now it's really been blowing up a bit. I've managed to get the chinook out just so I don't have the engine on as much, and we're just pushing along 3.7 knots, so we're not going very fast. I can't believe the size of some of the ships actually getting into this tiny little estuary. There seems to be quite an industrial area just over there where you have the canal factory, and I think they make lots of building products, insulation, plaster and all that jazz. Lots of different smells. It smelled like wet plaster and concrete. One minute I got chocolate, and then the next minute it smelled like one of those Spanish drains when you're on holiday. You know, you get that seweragey smell. So yeah, it's been a feast for the nostrils.
I pulled in the genoa for the little use it was for today and began tidying up the cockpit, putting all the ropes and rigging away. I made the most of the wider estuary before I entered into Faversham Creek, where we would only have 10 metres of width to play with. I then put all the monstrously oversized fenders out around the boat to protect the hull against where I'll be docking alongside Ironside. The last couple of fenders installed overboard, we made our way into Faversham Creek, and this is where the wheels fell off. One of my followers, Chris, was tracking the boat journey and asking how it was going. This momentary distraction led myself and Ivania to cross over this imaginary red line which marks the deepest part of the channel. I was checking the depth reader and I had plenty of depth under the keel, but it was reading feet and not meters. It felt like someone had pulled up the handbrake, and luckily it was in soft forgiving mud. And that look of trying to work out what's happened when you have 2.9 metres of depth under the keel when it's actually feet. And that is why you always want to approach somewhere on a rising tide if you've never been there before and you know it's notoriously shallow. After thrashing the engine back and forward, after 5 minutes you could feel the boat start to lift, and finally we were off again. There were so many underwater obstructions, especially the sunken yacht which was unlit. I would strongly recommend never navigating down this channel without expert knowledge at night time. Faversham is one of those places I'm sure many visiting yachtsmen prefer not to go to, but I find it's these hidden gems that you have to work hard to get to are always worth the effort. You don't always need wild waves and strong winds to enjoy yourself on the sea, and this trip was a well-needed break away from the relentlessness of the North Sea. The only way to navigate down this creek was by using Google Earth to spot the deepest part of the channel. Just holding the middle of the channel isn't enough to keep away from the shallows. Ivania was firmly on the mud for the second grounding of the day. The drone footage taken a couple of days later reveals the keel marks that Ivania left on the muddy embankment.
Incredibly frustrating coming down this Faversham Creek. I've hit mud twice now. Luckily the tide is rising, and that is why you always want to get... I made a schoolboy error where I changed my depth reader into reading feet and not meters, so that was throwing me today. So I've changed that setting and I'm much more familiar with, so hopefully we get off this mud bank. I'm just churning up the bottom, and another 5 minutes we'll get off there, and then I need to focus and get on Google Maps so I don't hit another mud bank, because I'm running out of tide now. It's getting a bit nerve-wracking.
Hugo and Fran were waiting patiently on the quayside at Faversham, I was getting constant calls and texts because all they could see was my mast moving and stopping every 5 minutes. Just like a good old western with twists and turns, Ivania and I crawled along the muddy creeks of Faversham. Coming to cinemas near you, The Wild Wild East, a belly full of mud. Was I going to make it to Faversham without getting stuck one more time? It took all of my energy to follow the Google Maps deepest part of the channel, and finally I emerged out of the creek. Finally, my harrowing ordeal had come to an end and I was reunited with my family. That's without getting stuck one more time.
How long we got until high tide?
An hour, isn't it?
Nearly an hour. Strong man.
Oh, pull him in.
Hugo pulled with all his strength to try and get his dad back to shore. Even I gave it a go and tried to pull Ivania closer to the barge, but it was no use. We were going to have to wait another hour until the tide rised. The ladies' rowing team flew past and mocked me with every rowing stroke. The berth we were supposed to have was hijacked by this red boat who came in the middle of the night. With the allocated berth now free, we reversed Ivania alongside Ironside where it would be our home for the next 2 nights. With the engine in full reverse, the keel was still scraping the mud and finally we landed in our berth. Sailing barge Ironside was launched in May 1990. The boat's 126 years old and it's in stunning condition. I'm not usually one for rafting, but it was an honour to be tied up to such a piece of maritime history. It's always worth hanging around the boat to make sure it settles nicely on the mud without putting too much tension on the cleats. After Ivania was safely on the bottom, we headed in to go and quench our thirst and try out some of the Shepherd's Name beers. We walked past Customs House, and Faversham used to have a rich history of smuggling, particularly with brandy and gin with the old Dutch oyster boats. And I apologise profusely to anyone who bought this crab after Hugo started stroking it. Faversham is famous for the oysters and it's one of the oldest recorded companies in the Guinness World Record, with its existence documented since 1147 when King Stephen gave it to Faversham Abbey. We headed back to the boat to try and avoid some of the rain showers that ensued and wondered where this welly had come from. I watched this poor bird navigating the creek and I knew exactly how it felt having got stuck 3 times. We took Hugo crabbing along with Grandad Claire off one of the jetties, but they weren't a touch on the ones we found in the fishmongers earlier on. After an action-packed day, it was time to watch the sun set with the cows roaming the pastures. After an incredibly peaceful sleep, we awoke to a beautiful sunny clear day. I got the drone up to take in some of the breathtaking scenery, and like a moth to a flame, Hugo awoke at the sound of the drone. It's a nice way to wake up when your 3-year-old is pretending to be a kettle. Having explored Faversham to death, we headed over to Whitstable for the day. And this is one of the benefits of having a wife who doesn't like sailing. It means you've always got the car at your disposal. Although Whitstable does have a working harbour, it's only open to commercial traffic and not pleasure vessels. And having witnessed how much swell you get within this harbour, I wouldn't want to stay here unless it was an emergency. Without fail, we popped into the RNLI shop to support all the amazing work they do, and lo and behold, we bumped into one of the subscribers. In Staten Brown, if you're watching, I've still got your pair of East Coast sailing shades. Whitstable's major form of trade is in lobsters and oysters. The Whitstable oyster fishery produces 100 metric tons of oysters, which equates to 1 million shells per year. It was a blustery old day, and the poor RNLI crew was struggling to get their boat back into the cage. It's bad enough when you're trying to reverse your boat into the marina with 2 people watching, never mind hundreds on the Whitstable beach. After a really enjoyable day at the beach, we headed for a short 5-minute walk to Whitstable Castle. They had a great park for the kids to go and blow off some steam, and a lovely terrace area that served ice cold beer. The castle was built in 1790, and you don't have to pay anything to enter the grounds. So if you don't like big crowds and you like a slower pace of life, this is the perfect place to unwind amongst their immaculately kept gardens. After an amazing day out, we headed back to Faversham into Papa Bianco's, which is our favourite pizza restaurant. They offer good authentic Italian stone-baked pizzas at affordable prices, set inside an old shipwright's factory. Out of all the places I've sailed to, this was by far my favourite destination. It was only an 8-hour sail from home, and being able to enjoy it with a family is priceless. The boatyard was equally as fascinating. There looked to be lots of abandoned projects representing people's hopes and dreams that never materialised. I'd witnessed firsthand a completely different side of Faversham I'd seen from when I visited over a year ago, and the friendly and welcoming nature of the liveaboards. We popped into the Guild Cafe for a little bit of breakfast before I departed over the Thames Estuary for a wild return journey home. And I have to say, the owners were exceptional with Hugo. They allowed him to press the button to do the juicer machine himself. After Hugo stroked the crab, he had turned into one himself. Hugo arrived at Faversham immaculately dressed, and he was returning home with stains down his top and dirt under his nails. I would say that's a pretty good gauge that he had an amazing time. Although it was a difficult place to navigate down to, it was worth every effort, and I was already planning my next trip back before I'd even left. I can assure you, you're not going to want to miss the wild return journey home. The wind speeds indicated for the day were 37 knot gusts with constant winds of 20, which inspired the latest t-shirt design, playing the hand that's dealt. And if you want to get your hands on some of the East Coast Sailing merch, head over to the East Coast Sailing store and click on any of the items. Just remember, 5% of the profits will go to the RNLI to keep our sailors safe, and the rest will go back into the channel to pay for camera equipment. And thanks to Kevin for sending his picture in of one of the early designs of the East Coast Sailing Flag's ivory t-shirt. I've got a few thank yous to say today, and first up is Roger with sailing vessel Devita located in Harwich. He bought his brother-in-law, who's also got a sailing YouTube channel called Saving Susanna. It's all about wooden boats, but I haven't seen any content come out in a while, so thank you very much. And next up is Ben Lazelle and Stephen Bradley, who bought the East Coast Sailing sunglasses. So if you want to buy a pair of these, go to www.eastcoastsailing.co.uk. That is the only place you can buy these. So 3 rings on the bell. Peace out for next time. Thanks for watching East Coast Sailing, and if you've enjoyed today's episode, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications to get the latest episodes. Make sure you tune in next week, because you're not going to want to miss the wild return journey home from Faversham back to Woolverstone. The Met weather was indicating wind speeds of 37 knots, so it's a sporty ride back home.